Hey y'all, it's me, Kevvie. So Pride Month may be officially over, but the pride never stops over here. I read a lot of wonderfully queer books for Pride Month, and it's time for me to share them with y'all. And I still need to do my wrap-up for my reading in May, as well as the non-Pride themed books that I read in June, but those are gonna be in a separate video. This one is exclusively that good gay shit. Yes! I began Pride Month by reading Giovanni's Room by James Baldwin. This book is a gay classic about an American man in France in the 50s exploring his sexuality with his lover Giovanni. It is magnificent, beautifully written, just terrific. The characters are pretty awful, but I feel like they also do a pretty good job at representing what it was like to be gay in that time. Homosexuality wasn't just frowned on, it was mostly illegal. Yeah, France was a little more lenient about it, but it still wasn't safe for an openly gay man in the 50s. So a lot of the more sneaky and shady behaviors are the result of them having to live their lives in secret, and the internal struggle of whether it's better to just deny that part of themselves in order to be accepted as a member of society, and if that acceptance is worth it. This book is beautiful and painful, and a classic that everyone must read. If you still aren't sold on it, I just posted a video reading one of my favorite scenes, so go check that out and then read this book. I read Nevada by Imogen Binnie through NetGalley. I already shared my thoughts on it in the Getting Gay with NetGalley video, which you can find here and in the description. My Aunt Jan encouraged me to read This Is How It Always Is by Laurie Frankel, which she was reading with her book club. Our video sharing our thoughts on it will be linked up there and down there. I also read the brand new release Legends of Drag Queens of a Certain Age by Devin, Antheus, and Harry James Hanson, right here on my shelves. Love it. I have a whole video dedicated to this book, as well as the premiere event here in Chicago, so go ahead and watch that video too. A few months back, I told y'all about how a couple of my friends are making a musical about Chicago's leather history, inspired by the book Leatherman, The Legend of Chuck Renslow. Well, this Pride Month, I finally read that book. Y'all, this book was fascinating. I knew Chuck Renslow was prolific, but I had no idea just how prolific that man was. Did you know he created the white party? For those who don't know, white parties are huge gay circuit parties where everyone dresses head to toe in white. The very first one was Chuck Renslow's birthday party in 1974, and now they have become ubiquitous with gay culture. Just wow. He also founded the Gold Coast Leather Bar, Man's Country Bathhouse, and the iconic IML competition. International Mr. Leather has been an annual pageant sort of thing for men in leather since 1979. And it has become such a huge tradition that here in Chicago, IML weekend has basically become a second Pride. So much of Chicago's queer history has been influenced by, if not straight up originated by, Chuck Renslow. He was even the founder of the Leather Archives and Museum, founded to preserve the work of his lover, Dom Orejudos, also known as the fetish artist Etienne. Renslow's legacy is far-reaching, and I had no idea until I read this book. And looking forward to seeing the musical they make out of it. The Little Blue Encyclopedia by Hazel Jane Plante is such a sweet, heartfelt novel about a trans woman mourning the loss of her trans best friend and unrequited love, Vivian. In an attempt to process her grief, the protagonist has written an encyclopedia of Vivian's favorite TV show, Little Blue, and interwoven personal anecdotes about Vivian throughout it. Little Blue sounds like a fascinating TV show, seeming to be based on Twin Peaks, but even weirder. Like, one of the characters is Tycho Brahe, and the audience has no idea if the character is just named that or the actual Tycho Brahe. The character also speaks exclusively in whatever language Tycho Brahe spoke. However, nobody on the show calls attention to this. They just continue responding to him as if he spoke clear English. I really loved imagining this fictional show, and it seemed like something I would really enjoy to watch. And the stories about Vivian were just so heartwarming. Reading this book brought me a feeling that I'm kind of struggling to articulate. Like joy, but calmer, more grounded, tranquility, serenity, something like that. It was just this quiet, soothing bliss that felt just so warm and cozy. Even though this book is so heavily about death, it's such a feel-good read. I loved it so much, but as far as I know, I'm the only person I know who's read it. So hopefully now a few of you will pick it up and read it because it's so good. It's so good. Oh my gosh, it's beautiful. I've been wanting to read The Parcel by Anosh Irani ever since I saw Scott and Nell from Gunpowder Fiction and Plot discuss it over on their channel. Oh, quick sidebar, but Nell just started her own channel separate from her husband. So make sure you subscribe to Book Hunt for all of her vulgar shenanigans. The Parcel is about a trans woman living in Kamathipura, the red light district of Mumbai. Having aged out of sex work, Madhu now relies on begging to survive, until one day she's assigned a job, one that she is in no position to turn down. A parcel has arrived in Kamathipura, and it is Madhu's responsibility to have it delivered. This is of course euphemism, and the titular parcel is actually a 10-year-old girl getting trafficked. Madhu has to prepare the girl to be handed over to the man who bought her. Before Madhu got into parcel work, these girls were broken in by being opened hundreds and hundreds of times. But Madhu felt like this method delivered a damaged and inferior product, and so sought to find a more humane way to break these girls' spirits. Damn, y'all, this book is so good. I really loved experiencing Kamathipura through Madhu's eyes and getting to know her Hijra family. There's a whole Hijra community in the parcel, where every Hijra belongs to one of 7 families, and they all have a leader who runs things and maintains business relationships with the other families. Madhu and her family under Gurumai are outliers because most of them are sex workers, which each of the main 7 houses forbids. I just loved learning about that world. And the scenes between Madhu and the parcel were just really well done. They did an excellent job of describing how each of Madhu's actions was meant to affect the child, and do so in a way without physically harming her, but doing what she had to make sure that this child understood that her old life was over, and prepare her for her new life. The ending was not at all what I expected, but it was perfect. I really loved this. Yeah, this is an excellent book, and I'm so glad I finally read it. About halfway through June, I realized, wait a minute, I could be listening to my trans books too. The first one I picked up was A Dream of a Woman by Casey Plett. I first heard of this book through Rosie Cockshut, who was overall disappointed with it. I hoped that perhaps as a trans person, maybe it would resonate with me more. First off, right when the audiobook began and I heard Casey Plett's trans voice, oh, it gave me a huge surge of gender euphoria. It felt so good to hear the voice of a trans author reading these stories. And that in itself made this book worth it for me. A Dream of a Woman is a collection of short stories centering transgender women. Right out of the gate, the first story really did a number on me. It's about a trans woman who, as a kid, had a crush on this boy, and they were good friends until she moved away. But then one day as adults, she runs into him again, and it's the beginning of a beautiful relationship. I really connected with this story. I had a childhood friend who I didn't realize at the time, but was probably queer too. We were both the shy, awkward kids, and we bonded over swimming and Pokemon. He moved away at some point, I think maybe even before middle school, but I often think about him, and I wonder what might have happened if we'd gotten to grow up together, or if we ever saw each other again, would something be there? So this story of having her reconnect with her childhood friend and they're falling in love, oh, it gave me so much joy. And then the beautiful boy becomes a beautiful girl, which sounds like heaven to me, but the protagonist Hazel dumps her, and that broke me. Why the fuck did she do that? Her, of all people, should be able to appreciate a partner transitioning, but instead she fucking ends it. I was crushed, and I was just sobbing and had to message Rosie. So that was the first story. The rest of it was fine. The second to last story was way too long with not nearly enough payoff. Yeah, that one was really dissatisfying. However, I liked the Absolution storyline, which was spread out across the book in between the other stories. Yeah, overall, this collection was not my favorite. I'd had Light from Uncommon Stars on my TBR for a while, but I wasn't terribly drawn to it. It sounded like there'd just be too much going on all at once, and the focus on the violins just didn't really appeal to me. And on top of that, I had just watched another booktuber who complained that the audiobook really didn't work for them because it shifted perspectives without telling you. So I really didn't think I was going to like this one, but it was free to listen to on Scribd, so I gave it a chance. My first thought when I started this audiobook was, why is the narrator whispering? Was it meant to be like an ASMR audiobook or something? That really put me off at first, but by the end of the first hour, I was hooked. I personally didn't find the perspective jumps hard to follow. It seemed pretty clearly indicated as long as you were paying attention. The story itself is unique. It's about a space alien woman and her children who run a donut shop in LA, and then she falls in love with a violin teacher who had made a deal with a demon many years ago that's coming back to bite her. In order to save her own soul, the violin teacher was given 49 years to find and train 7 violin prodigies and then give their souls to this demon. Violin teacher has just found her 7th prodigy, a homeless Asian transgender sex worker. Yeah, they really threw everything but the kitchen sink into this book. And it shouldn't work, but it does. It really does. I enjoyed this book way more than I thought I would. All of the characters were just wonderful. It was sweet and charming and even had excellent moments of tension. And the trans representation in this book was excellent. Oh my gosh, and it's even full of references to Undertale. Undertale is one of the biggest indie video games ever, about a child who falls into this magical world and has to go on this quest to get home. The twist, though, is that while you're battling your way through the different environments, you can make a choice. You have the option to defeat your opponent or spare them. And this choice will significantly alter your gameplay and the storyline of the game. It is so cool and was hugely adopted by like queer culture, and it is just this huge beloved thing now. So yeah, our trans violinist Katrina is obsessed with video game music and plays a lot of the soundtrack from the in-universe equivalent of Undertale, which makes sense because Undertale is known for its excellent soundtrack. And then when Katrina explains the game to her teacher, Shizuka Satomi has an epiphany. Is there a way she could complete her task without having to doom 7 souls? Can she save Katrina? I love that this video game plays such a pivotal moment in the story's narrative. I don't think I could think of a single thing I didn't love about this book. Genuinely, no complaints. I can't believe I almost didn't read this book, and now it's one of my favorite books of the year. Could not love it more. Next, I listened to Redefining Realness by Janet Mock. I never really knew who Janet Mock was, aside from being the one who wrote the trans memoir, so I was curious to learn a little more about her through this book. Immediately, it wasn't resonating with me. The book opens with her discussing being stealth, which means keeping your trans identity a secret. I understand the necessity of it, why many trans people choose to live stealth. On the one hand, it's a safety thing. Trans people face so much discrimination, and by living as stealth, you can bypass some of that. However, mentally, it can really be a challenge. The perpetual fear of getting clocked, of people finding out your truth. When in 35 states in this country, it is perfectly legal to murder someone if your excuse is that finding out they were trans sent you into a blind rage. It's called the trans panic defense. And yes, it is real and illegal in the majority of America. So if while you're living stealth, you welcome the wrong person into your life, or you go out with the wrong guy, you could wind up dead. So yeah, that shit's fucking scary. But also, I struggle to relate to stealth trans people because I could not imagine trying to live my life in the closet like that. I have fought so hard to be an out and proud trans woman, and my transness is as integral a part of me as my womanness. So yeah, from the jump, I was not vibing with her over this. But then the whole rest of the memoir is just her childhood and teenage years, and that's it. It ends in high school. I don't know about you, but I don't think anyone's teenage years can be that interesting. It did not need to be the entire book. So why was this book such a big deal? Well, alongside Laverne Cox and Orange is the New Black, this book was the transgender tipping point. Redefining Realness put trans people on the map. This book came out at the perfect time and was what was needed at the time. For a world that had never heard of trans people before, Mock's experiences were new and fascinating. Now that trans memoirs are becoming more and more common, it feels pedestrian. And I feel like her history of living stealth really influenced her to pander this book to a cishet audience. It is just the most watered down story, makes no waves, and conforms to cis and heteronormative standards. I am so glad that this book exists and was able to introduce so many people to the trans experience, but nowadays there are many others I'd recommend over this. I tried listening to The Appointment by Katharina Volckmer because it was short and listed under trans fiction. I couldn't tell you if it was really trans or not because I didn't get that far into it. It was really just not my kind of book. This woman was just rambling and rambling, but none of it could retain my interest. I guess the shock value of the opening line, "One time I dreamt I was Hitler," is supposed to be attention grabbing, but that was not able to retain my interest one bit. If there is trans content, it must come significantly later or just be alluded to. There was one point where she mentioned something about men's bathrooms and then another thing about what's under her skirt, and that is just not enough trans representation for me to remain invested, especially in something listed as trans fiction. Like, where's the trannies? So yeah, DNF. The last audiobook I listened to for Pride Month was Little Fish, also by Casey Plett. It's about a trans girl named Wendy, whose grandmother just passed. She's at her Oma's house, picking up her things, when the phone rings, and an old friend of her grandparents suggests that Wendy's grandfather might have been trans too. Right off the bat, I loved Little Fish so much more than A Dream of a Woman. The characters were great, the plot was intriguing, and I really wanted to keep reading, or listening, whatever. Then something happened about halfway through the book that made me DNF it. Spoilers and trigger warnings ahead. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. One of Wendy's trans friends, Sophie, who we've spent the whole first half of the book getting to know and love, has a trick go horribly wrong, and in the aftermath of that event, she kills herself. Then the next chunk of the book is just Wendy and her trans friends all mourning Sophie, and then going to the funeral and watching Sophie's family and friends grieve, and hearing stories about all the ways that this friend had touched people. This fucked me up. It caused me to have the worst mental health day I have had all year. And this is the same year I read Manhunt. I understand and respect the author's decision to include this storyline in her book. Little Fish is portraying the reality of trans women, and one of those realities is that a lot of us kill ourselves, and even more have attempted to. So its inclusion just lends to its authenticity, but also just ouch. As a trans woman, I know this truth already. I don't need to be reminded of it in my fiction. It also seemed to harken back to ye olden days, when you weren't allowed to write about queer characters unless they were miserable and or died. While I don't think this would be properly considered a bury your gays trope, it definitely had that sort of painful impact on me. I also feel like I should have known better. I should have seen it coming. But surprisingly, not a single one of the trans books that I read in April or June featured trans suicide. So that lulled me into this false sense of security. I thought it was safe, even when they discussed being suicidal earlier in the book, because, oh, that's just something trans people talk about. I didn't think they would actually do it, but they did, and I just couldn't continue. I still really enjoyed what I did read of it, so I would still recommend it. I just don't know if I could ever finish it. I started and ended Pride Month by reading James Baldwin. I started with his gay novel Giovanni's Room and ended with his essay on racial injustice called The Fire Next Time. This was an excellent read, and a perfect segue into my reading plans for July, where I will be prioritizing books from Black authors. I'll discuss this story more in July. But yeah, no, it was the perfect way to round off Pride Month. So there you have all the Pride books I read in June. And with that, we've come to the end of my Pride content. Oh my gosh, I am just so proud of all of the videos that I release this month. In case you missed any, I have a whole playlist called #Pride2022, which will be right here, of course, and in the description. It includes my single book reviews for This Time For Me, Detransition Baby, This Is How It Always Is, Legends of Drag, as well as my Pride readings, a tag, a conversation about identity, and even some performances. Please give these videos some love because I worked so hard on them. And if I do say so myself, they are damn good. Have you read any of these Pride books? What did you read for Pride? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you all so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And if it pleases and sparkles, I'll see you in the next video. Mwah!